It says we're live. Howdy, everybody. And this week,
I'm waving.
You're waving too, but we can't see you.
Yeah.
All right. We're welcoming a very, very special guest, and that's Dan Hodnett of Dan's Fish, Get Gills, and most of you know him. And before I formally introduce Dan, I'll just say some quick hellos. Welcome to the panel. Everybody up here is an awesome fish keeper. They have great channels and different perspectives of our hobby, and sometimes much more than just the fish hobby that you might be interested in. So check them out as you see the links. And if you're not subbed, give them a subscribe. And special welcome to the members. I always forget to mention those guys, so they really support the channel. And our moderators are the most awesome in the world. So there you go. But our very special guest is Dan, and I'm going to bring Dan up. And Dan, we're witnessing history in our fish hobby because he is changing literally the face of the hobby and what your expectations should be when you buy fish and that kind of thing. So we asked him to talk about shipping, and he can talk about whatever he wants to. It'll be great information. So Dan, welcome.
Well, thanks, Bob. Special in many ways. Hopefully a couple of them are the right ways. But glad to be here, everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see me okay. Do let me know if you can't, because this is a different setup than I'm usually on, and my tech can be a little bit finicky, to say the least, when I change things. So hopefully it's coming through okay. I usually decline most offers to come join another channel or do a collab with someone. And it's not because I don't want to, it's just because I'm up to my eyeballs building the new fish warehouse, on top of just trying to run the businesses that we have. So all that together just is a time suck. But when the Codfather calls, I like my kneecaps. Wanted to keep my kneecaps healthy, so I said I'll be there. So here I am. And the other reason is Bob asked me to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's one of the topics where I feel like I'm actually uniquely qualified to talk about it, and that's shipping fish. I feel like there's many people in our hobby and in the fish fam community and in the mafia itself here that know how to do a lot with fish and other aspects of our hobby. They know how to care for fish. They know how to breed fish and raise fry. They know how to set up tanks. They know how to set up systems, and they can answer a lot of questions. The one area that I think I can add some distinct value on is shipping fish. And it's just because it's something that it's a part of this hobby and industry, really, that oddly enough, I'm very passionate about. That's an odd thing to be passionate about, maybe, but I am. So I want to explain why shipping fish is so important to me. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do it here and some principles to keep in mind. And then maybe answer any questions at all that anyone might have, or any discussion. Whatever you want to know about shipping fish, if I can answer it, I will. So the beginning of this is the reason I started digging into shipping fish was as a youngster. This was almost 30 years ago. I started keeping killifish. That was the first kind of area of fish I really got into. And the only way you could get killifish was through the American Killifish Association. Aquabid did not exist yet. The internet was not even a dream in, I don't know, the tech god's eyes at that time. At least not for normal people. ARPANET was out there and Apache and stuff. But basically, there was no way to get fish besides shipping. And there's also something called the North American Fish Breeders Guild, I believe. And there was these mail pamphlets, basically, that you would get a pamphlet every month from the American Killifish Association or the Fish Breeders Guild. They would say, hey, here's what folks have available. And so then you could call them or write them and say, hey, I would like this many of this, and I have this to trade, or, I'd like to buy these, whatever, and you could get your fish. But you had to do it through the mail. So from an early age, it became very important for me to learn how to ship fish. So that was the introduction. then throughout my life, something that's always been very frustrating is when friends find out that I like aquarium fish, they often say, oh yeah, I used to keep fish, but they all died. And so when I decided to do this for a business, I really dug into that. And I was like, okay, what is it that's making it so that all my friends stop fish keeping? They get a tank, the fish die within, I don't know, a few weeks or a month, and that's a discouraging experience. And so they just quit. What is it that's creating that negative narrative around the fish industry? And I identified two things. Number one is probably ignorance. And these aren't in any particular order, but one thing is ignorance, right? People might buy fish on a whim, not understand that they actually need to research how to set up an aquarium and create an artificial ecosystem and the nitrogen cycle and all that, right? And so they start a tank with no information, buy these, go home, throw water in the tank. It's crystal clear. It looks great. Throw the fish right in, and then we know what happens. So that's number one, right? Is maybe diving into fish keeping without educating yourself. So lack of education, or the education's out there. So maybe it's just failure to educate yourself. Number two, though, was a little different. And that's just the industry and the supply chain, how fish are treated and how fish are transported in the fish industry. And so basically what happens is fish arrive to the end consumer. I'm shortening this a lot, but in the end, what happens is little Johnny or little Susie marches into the fish store and says, Mommy, I want some fish. And they get some fish. And even if they've done all the research and have the tank set up perfectly and all that, what they don't know is that the fish they're buying are very, very stressed. Their immune systems are compromised because of the stress of import and transportation and all that. And because their immune systems are compromised, if you don't know how to care for compromised fish like that, they're not going to do well for you. So little Johnny or Susie go, they're very excited, they get the fish home, and within a little while, the fish is dead. So that's where I started thinking, what can I do to break that negative experience and to save fish's lives, basically? And so I was like, okay, what can be done to get fish to the end consumer where the fish is healthy and will thrive for them? And so that's why I got really into shipping fish. It's like, okay, what is it that fish are going through in the supply chain? And I understood that pretty well because I've worked at many levels of the fish industry doing many, many different things. So I've seen the fish supply chain. I know the industry. I know what happens. And okay, so being that the fish are subjected to this supply chain, what can I do on my end, because I can't control everything, but what can I do that's under my control to make the experience for the end consumer better? And the biggest thing I could do was help the fish recover from the rigors of the supply chain. So help their immune system that's compromised from stress recover before I send them to the customer, and then ship them to the customer properly when I do so. So that's how I got really into fish keeping. And it became a mission of mine to change that narrative from, I used to keep fish, but they all died, to, I love my fish. They calm me down after a tough day at work, and I can sit and watch the tank for a few minutes and relax. My heart rate drops, and I'm a better, wife or husband or partner or uncle or citizen or friend or whatever than I would otherwise be, right? That's been my experience with tanks, is when I'm super stressed, sit down, watch an aquarium, I can feel the tension melt away. There's just something magical about nature in your home. And I want everyone to have that experience. So it became a mission for me. It became a passion. So that is why I do it the way I do. There was a lot of testing. There was a lot of trying to figure out the best way. And I'm not here claiming that what I do is the best way, but I do think that I found some principles that, if they're kept in mind, are important to factor into shipping fish, transporting fish. So however those principles are achieved is fine. As my grandpa used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Sorry, all you cat lovers. I'm a cat lover, but that's the saying. And so I'll tell you what I do, but I'm not saying it's what you should do. But there are principles that need to be kept in mind. So number one is selecting the fish we're going to send out to a customer or to a friend we're sending fish to, or trading with, or whatever, right? If you're shipping fish or receiving fish, right? You want this to have happened if you're receiving fish. The number one thing you can do if you're trying to get fish to someone in good shape on that side is pick healthy fish. And there's no such thing as a healthy fish if it's new to you. At least there's no such thing as a high percentage of likelihood that it will be healthy. So the first thing we need to do is give the fish time. Time is magical. Fish are tough. They've got amazing adaptations and physiological responses and things set up within them to be healthy. And if given half a chance, they'll become healthy. So the best thing I think you can do before you ship anyone fish is give the fish time to recover. If it's new to you, let's say you're a store like me, right? And you got a new import in. You can't then just list them for sale and start shipping them, which is the status quo, unfortunately, in the fish industry. Or if you're a pet store and you just got new fish in, if you start selling them right away, that's the status quo for the industry. And that results in little Johnny and little Susie being very disappointed when the fish dies because of its compromised immune system. So give them time. I call it the fish day spa. That's what we strive to do here at Dan's Fish. We want to be the place where the fish end up after the rigors of import, where they can relax, de-stress, adjust to life in aquariums if they aren't used to that. Maybe they came from a pond at a farm or something and they're not used to being in a glass box, or maybe they were harvested from the wild and they're not used to that. So let them have time to get used to the new environment, set things up so they have a place to hide. Often when new fish come in, you have to give them live foods. If they're not accustomed to flake foods and pellets and all that, start them on something that they will eat readily. Blackworms, brine shrimp, scuds, snails, if you have like puffers or loaches and things, there's foods that they'll eat readily. And then you can transition them to prepared foods. But the last thing you want to do, I think, is take a fish that's already stressed and immunocompromised and put another stress on it, which is I'm going to give you food you don't know how to eat yet, right? So get them fat and sassy, transition them to aquarium foods. In that period, for us, it's at least 2 weeks, but sometimes it's several months, depending on the fish and what it's gone through. That period of recovery time is essential. Now, a lot of you are hobbyists, and the fish you're going to be sending out are probably fish you've bred and raised, so they're already accustomed to that, or fish you've had long term and now you just want to try something else or whatever. So this might not be as applicable to all hobbyists, but for anyone who gets into the game of buying fish from wholesalers or importing or whatever, I think that rest period, that day spa, and it's at least a couple weeks that it takes, is essential. And anyone that's brought in new fish knows this. If you've brought in new fish, you know it's going to take a few days before they kind of settle in and start venturing out a lot of times, depending on the species and their background. But a lot of times it takes a couple weeks before they're really out, they're sparring, they're colored up fully, they're eating readily. You walk up to the tank, they come up to the glass expecting food. All the fear responses are gone. They're well socialized. Now, there are certain species that just are more skittish. But in general, if you pay attention to how long it takes your fish to settle in, color up fully and all that, if they're fresh off the boat, so to speak, you know this. It takes at least a couple weeks. So why are we selling fish before they've had a couple weeks to recover? We shouldn't. So that's item number one. Give the fish time to recover. So here's the process we go through when we ship fish. Number one is, let's say we're about to, let's talk about prep of the water. So the first thing we do when we know we have orders to pack is we get fresh water. This is not water that has been in a tank with fish in it. It comes from a container that has an air stone in it, and the water's been bubbling for at least 12, 24 hours, something like that. So we're using fresh water, tap water, that's been dechlorinated and stabilized, gassed off. What happens is if you use water from your aquarium to ship your fish, that water's got a lot of stuff in it that we can't see. There's all kinds of protozoans and microorganisms and algae and stuff in that water. And when you're sending a fish, it's in this very small closed system, this bag, right, with some water and some air in it. It very quickly, those little microorganism populations, bacteria's in there too, lots of stuff, they can boom. And when they boom in population, because they're in this enclosed system, they deplete oxygen. Oxygen that the fish would be breathing is now being used by all these little organisms. And they can get in such high concentrations that they can create ammonia, they can become pathogenic. There's all kinds of issues. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. So we use water from the tap, we dechlorinate it. In our case, we use carbon block filters to do that, but you can use, Seachem Safe or Prime or Amquil or whatever it is, but a dechlorinator in there. And we let it sit with an air stone bubbling for 12 to 24 hours. The reason for that is when water comes out of your tap, it's unstable. There's all kinds of artificial things that happen to water when it's in the pressurized system of your tap. There's all kinds of things that municipalities do to water chemically to make sure it doesn't corrode the pipes that the water is delivered in and all that, and the treatment systems and all that. So when the water comes out of your tap, it's very unstable generally. So by giving it time and letting the air stone be in there bubbling away, it stabilizes that. The water reverts to its natural pH instead of the artificial pH that lots of municipalities make to make the water alkaline so it doesn't hurt the pipes. All the bubbles that have been, all the gases that are dissolved in the water because it's been under pressure and probably cold get released as the water warms up and gets churned. So you don't give fish the bends, basically. And so the water becomes stable. So we're using this stabilized dechlorinated tap water. We add 5 grams of salt per liter, so 5 parts per thousand salt. That helps reduce osmotic pressure osmotic stress in the fish while they're being shipped. And we add a little Seachem Safe, and that detoxifies any ammonia that might be released while the fish is in the bag. So that's the water, and it's also the right temperature, right? It's been sitting in our fish room, and the fish room is the right temperature for the fish. We don't heat individual tanks here. We just heat the room. But if you have individual tanks, that's fine. Get a little heater or something. Make sure that your bucket of shipping water is the right temperature, the same temperature pretty much as the aquarium before you catch the fish. So that's all happened. So what we do is we take a bag big enough for the fish, for one fish. We fill it. We put some of that water in it that I talked about previously. We go over to the aquarium to catch the fish. But before we catch the fish, we just take a minute or two and we stand back and we watch the tank. We want to do that before we disturb the fish, before we lift the lid, before we grab the net and the fish all like scatter because they're scared because you got the net, right? We want to watch the fish kind of acting more or less naturally, because that'll allow us to identify anyone that's up in the corner kind of wiggling, anyone that's not joining the group if they're a schooling fish, anyone that's swimming a little funky. You can get a sense of who's maybe not, who you don't want to ship, because you don't want to ship fish that aren't acting as they should. So once you know who you don't want to ship in the tank, if there is anyone, then you can make a good decision on the fish you select. So observe them. Once you know, hey, everyone in here is fine, I don't have to worry about anyone, or oh, there's that one up there, I'm not going to catch that one. Then go ahead and select your fish, put it in the bag with the water. And we do this. So I just did this all day today. I was catching fish. The fish won't ship till tomorrow. So today I got the fish, put them in the bag. What's going to happen is they're going to sit overnight in that bag. And the reason is because I want them to void their bowels before they get sent off to the customer, right? I don't want them pooping while in transit, basically. And the only way I've found to really make sure that happens is to put them in a bag with water in it. If you just cut feed in the tank, the problem is lots of fish will eat anything. So they'll eat detritus, they'll eat bits of algae, they'll eat whatever. So you're like, I didn't feed them. They found something to eat anyway, right? So not all fish will do this, but there's a lot that will, that are omnivores. So in order to really make sure they're not eating, we found we need to put them in the bag. So they'll sit overnight. Tomorrow morning, what we will do is we will do 100% water change. We'll take all that water out of the bag, net the fish out, put fresh water in the bag. Again, it's just that gassed off, stable, dechlorinated tap water that's had salt and Seachem Prime added to it. And we'll put the fish back in the bag, at which point we'll seal it up and ship it. So you're trying to select good fish that are de-stressed, and you're trying to send them and make sure the water they're going in is really clean. If waste builds up in that bag, not only can ammonia be a problem, but oxygen saturation in the water drops dramatically, and the fish can suffocate or be poisoned by the ammonia. And there's lots of other things that can happen. The reason we don't, you might say though, well, why don't you just catch them, put them in the bag, and then send them? Because they're gonna they're gonna poop overnight. So what's the advantage of having them poop here and then get a water change and be sent versus just put them in the box, send them in, and the customer can take them out of the dirty water tomorrow? And that's where we get in the issue of delays and temperature. So the issue with that is if you put the fish in the bag and you're like, yeah, it's going to poop, but tomorrow morning the customer can take it out of the dirty water, just like I would be doing if I was holding it longer, right? What if there's a delay? What if the box gets held up and it's not going to be delivered? Let's say we send it Monday. It would normally be delivered on Tuesday, but there's a delay now. It won't arrive till Wednesday or Thursday. Well, now that's a problem. But the other reason is things we can't control while they're in transit have a major effect. One of these is temperature. If the water is very clean, it can hold a lot more oxygen. And so let's say the box gets a little too hot in transit. If that fish bag has a bunch of poop in it from the fish, or a bunch of organisms in it because you used aquarium water instead of clean, aged, gassed off, dechlorinated tap water to ship your fish, the oxygen saturation in warm water drops. And if you combine that with poop in the bag or other organisms in the bag and things like that, then the fish has a hard time. Like it can suffocate, not enough oxygen in the water. So we make sure the water is super clean and will stay clean while in transit. Now, every now and then a fish sneaks its lunch in, and I don't know how they do it. But in general, if when the customer receives a fish, it should be nice, clean water. If there's a problem and the temperature gets hot in the box, the fish is much more likely to still be okay than if it was shipped in dirty water because oxygen saturation can be maintained. So that's why we do that. So anyway, we do that. We put one fish in each bag, one fish per bag. The principle there is if one fish has a problem and dies, you don't want it killing all the other fish you're shipping out to your friend or your customer or whatever, right? We've all seen it where you get, someone will put 6 or a dozen fish in a bag and send them. If one of those fish gets sick and dies or something happens, then it immediately starts to, decompose in the bag. And now you got an ammonia spike and all kinds of little organisms multiplying and bacteria multiplying and exploding. And now all the other fish are going to die, right? There's this chain reaction that happens. So if we just send fish individually, we prevent that whole thing. And that even applies to schooling fish. So I've gone back and forth on this. What if it's a fish that is more comfortable in a school? Something like an African glass catfish. Those guys really need to be in schools, right? If they're in a big group around, they feel very uncomfortable. Well, we've tried it both ways, and the best results were with still individually bagging. This holds true with tetras and other schooling fish as well, little microrhizoboras, things like that. So yes, they'll have to be alone for a day while they're being shipped, but the results are much, much better than if they're in a group and one dies and you get that bad chain reaction. So one fish per bag, you'll prevent so many problems. It's a lot more work, but it's what's best for the fish. So why not do it? So we take that individual bag, and then the other thing we need to be aware of is what the fish is going to go through temperature-wise while in transit, right? So every order we have, the day it's being sent, we check weather.com, and we print the weather on the order. So I know what your temperatures are going to be. I know what they are today. I know what they're going to be tomorrow. So I can say, hey, here's the right size heat pack for this, or temperatures will be fine, no heat pack, or man, it's going to be super hot over there. I better put in a cold pack. So figuring out cold pack and heat packs. Every fish you send, you got to know the temperature of the destination, but it's also helpful to know the path the fish are going to take. Are they going to go to Memphis because they're being shipped via FedEx? Are they going to go to Louisville because they're being shipped via UPS? If you're doing USPS, good luck. I don't know what those paths are. They're very convoluted. But I know when I ship fish here from Sheridan, Wyoming, they're going to go to Billings, Montana, and then most of them are going to end up in Louisville, Kentucky, and a portion of them are going to end up in California, depending on which coast they're going to. So I know the temperatures in all those areas before I send the fish, so I can kind of map their journey and figure out what kind of heat pack, cold pack, or no pack they should go in. But something really important to remember is, let's say it's perfect. Let's say it's 75 degrees here and 75 degrees in, I don't know, in Maine. I'm sending a fish to Maine for some reason, Bangor, Maine. You would think, oh, great, that's perfect. I don't need to do anything. I just throw these fish in a box, they'll be fine. I don't need insulation, temperatures are perfect. Well, that's not quite right, because the fish are going to go on an airplane. That airplane's going to get up to 30,000 feet or whatever in altitude. And as we all know, if you've ever climbed a mountain, temperatures plummet when you climb in elevation. So even if the temperatures are perfect, the fact that they're going on an airplane and going on this journey through the sky means that the temperatures are not going to be good the entire trip, because they're going to climb in elevation. So I don't think it's ever appropriate to send fish in a box that is not well insulated. And when you pick your insulation, make sure it's something that's going to hold up to the jiggling and jostling that they're going to experience during transit. Soft insulation doesn't really work, because you have this bag with water in it and a fish inside, setting on, let's say it's like that blow-in insulation that you can use to blow insulation into your attic or whatever. Or it's that soft Pink Panther stuff, that pink stuff. Well, if you put a bag of water with fish in it on top of insulation that's squishy and not firm, as it jiggles and jostles, it's going to compact that, right? And all the insulatory properties go away once it's compacted. Basically, you end up with the bag of fish sitting right on the cardboard, more or less, and the insulative barrier goes away. So what I've had the best success with is firm styrofoam, rigid styrofoam, because no matter what happens, that bag isn't going to jostle that and end up sitting on the box. So I guess those are the main things. Pick healthy fish that are de-stressed, use the right water and make sure it stays clean during the journey, and then be aware of what the temperatures are going to be on the journey and how you're going to keep the temperatures in the box appropriate for the fish, no matter what the outside temperatures are. And if anyone needs, I can go into details on how to use heat packs and all that. But that's the basic process we do. It's a 2-day process. That's why I often have to tell people that buy fish from us and want them right now that, I'm sorry, I can't. It's going to be 2 days. Most people understand, but every now and then people think we're Amazon and that fish are forks and not living individuals. But it takes time to do it right. But anyway, that's the process we've come up with. And the real results from that are less than 0.5% of our animals have problems. It does happen. Anytime there's a possibility something will go wrong, then statistically it will eventually go wrong. But in general, it's going really well. So yeah, that's me, Bob.
All right, Dan, thank you. I'm going to bring the rest of the panel back up. And there were a couple of questions. Skipper answered one for you. Someone asked if you use breather bags or regular bags, and Skipper told them regular bags. And you double bag, right?
Yeah, so that's worth talking about for a minute. So I'm going to talk about breather bags and redundancy for a second. So USPS, UPS, and FedEx all have a regulation, which is that everything be double bagged. The idea is if the bag that the fish is in should leak, then there's some redundancy there. And there's a second bag to catch any water that should leak if there's a problem with the first bag, right? The carriers have a big problem when we send fish and the bags leak, because then not only does it ruin your box, we've all received those boxes that have got wet, right? And they're just sludgy and nasty, but it ruins all the packages around them, right? It's not an isolated, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. And so one of the quickest ways to make it so that carriers will no longer let us send aquarium fish in the mail, which would be horrible for me and for the hobby in general, I think, is to not package the fish with redundancy, is to package in such a way that there's leaks and lots of packages are being destroyed, because now they've got not just our box that's a problem, but now they've also got a dozen customers that are pissed off because their stuff got destroyed, right? So the problem with breather bags, and I know a lot of great breeders and sellers that use them, so if you can use them properly, go ahead. But the problem is it's very difficult to double bag breather bags in a way that they still work. Breather bags are finicky. You have to have the atmosphere transfer through the bag, and you have to have barriers between and certain things to make double bagging work. And I've never seen it work. I've tried it several times. Other people have tried it. I've never seen it work. They're also flimsier. They tend to just leak more, and they also breathe, which creates moisture on the outside. So you get condensate on the outside. So because of those reasons, I don't use breather bags. Now, people that I respect a lot, like Greg Sage, do. Greg uses them. I think he does a great job. But he doesn't double bag, and if there was a problem, there would be an issue. So no breather bags for me. What we use are extra thick 4 mil bags. The industry standard is 2 mil, but we like 4 mil. They hold up better. And if you got a spiny pleco or a puffer with some teeth on it or something, they're less likely to bite through or poke through the bag. Corridors are spiny. You can have issues. So we use 2 4 mil bags, and one is done, and then it's set into another one and sealed off as well. So it's 2 completely separate seals. The other thing I sometimes see is people will double bag, but they'll only put on 1 rubber band or 1 seal. So you still have a single point of failure, even though you're using 2 bags. The idea is to have 2 points that would have to fail. That's the whole point of double bagging. So that's my spiel on that.
Someone else mentioned, and I think it was Aquaval's George, said the CPD's okay for 1 bag too. And I think he was saying, would you put more than 1 CPD? I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, they're fine. 1 bag, 1 fish per bag, CPDs. I do it all the time. And
okay.
Again, it's just anything we can do to mitigate the risk once the fish are out of our control, which they are when they're being in transit, we should do, I feel like. Why not? And so one thing we can do to mitigate the risk is 1 fish per bag. Now, if you were to send more fish in a single bag, then CPDs and other dwarf tiny nanofish are probably less likely to have a problem than larger fish. So if you were to do it, nanofish would probably be the best way to do it. Just because if one dies, it doesn't create such a big ammonia boom and stuff. It's a small organism. But I have done that in the past. CPDs and tiny little dwarf killifish and things like that. But I eventually had to ask myself the question, why am I doing this? And the reason was I was being lazy. It was just so much easier to put more in a bag. So I just stopped. It seemed, if there's a better way to do it, why wouldn't I do it that way? That's how I looked at it.
All right, panel. Questions, chat, questions?
Okay, so I noticed, Dan, that you stopped shipping at a certain point, like November, December. Is that every year, or is it based on the seasons? Or is that just we have a deadline, a time that we're just not going to ship?
That's for the holidays. So right around Thanksgiving, there's a little bit before and right after Thanksgiving we don't ship. And then around Christmas, there's like 2 weeks to 3 weeks before Christmas, and then not until after New Year's do we ship. And the reason is UPS and FedEx and USPS just get slammed. So there's a very high likelihood that there will be delays just because they have so many packages that they're trying to deliver. Especially the last couple of years with COVID and how hard it's been for we've all seen the delays in all the carriers sometimes, right? So take the possibility of a delay and multiply it by a factor of like, I don't know, a magnitude of like 3 or 4, and that's what happens during the holidays. So after doing this for enough years and kind of flirting with the edge, how close to Christmas can I ship and not have a problem? We decided, again, why are we flirting with the edge? It varies every year depending on demand and what's going on. So it was hard to find the exact date. So we just made this broad window, and we're glad we have. I think we have a lot. It's just not fair to the fish, I think, to send them when I know the likelihood of a delay is much higher than normal. So
Dan Piplin Creek Aquatics is asking if you still use pure oxygen in your bags.
Oh, that's a good question. We do. Anyone looking at where you can get pure oxygen, just go to your local like welding supply company. You don't need to get medical grade. It's basically the same thing. It's just one will cost you hundreds of dollars and the other one will cost you like $25 to fill up. So it's initially pretty expensive because you have to buy the oxygen canister and you have to buy the regulator and the hoses and all that. But once it's set up, then the refills, which is actually an exchange, but to get new oxygen is not very expensive at all. Now, that being said, you don't have to have that. It's nice. What it allows me to do is put more water in the bag than I otherwise would. And that's nice because the more water you have in the bag, the slower the temperature in the box changes. Water, it has a very high specific heat, right? So it takes a lot of joules of energy to heat water. So let's say that the box is going out on a hot day. If it has more water in it, it's going to take a lot more heat to heat that water up than it would otherwise. So we use the water itself as a heat sink. So instead of putting only like 25% water, 75% air, or a third water and 2/3 air, we can put about half water and half air with no problem because we're using pure oxygen. Now, that being said, if you're not using pure oxygen, that's fine. You can just use atmosphere. You can use like a air pump with a little rigid hose on it to fill up your bag. That makes it easy. Or you can do the quick grab and trap method. That is fine as well. Or the pinch and roll. There's different methods. That's just fine. Just be aware you're probably going to want a little more atmosphere in there than you would if you're using pure oxygen.
One thing I'm going to point out as far as oxygen, now I have one of these here. This is a propane torch. You can buy these at Home Depot and Lowe's. But what will also screw onto there, now I'm not telling you to use it with a sparker or anything, but is an oxygen bottle that you can buy from there. I don't know that it's safe. It's something I have considered if I were to ship as a quick, cheap method. But it's something worth looking into.
Can you regulate the pressure coming out, or is it going to come out at really high pressure?
No, they have a control knob.
Okay.
Yeah. So
cool.
You could easily just turn it down and send out a little bit straight and just use that as a dispenser.
That's a new trick to me. Cool.
Now I got a question. When you're sealing your bags, do you still like you put the oxygen in? Okay, do you seal it till like a little bit on the outside is still an opening? Put your oxygen in and then hurry up and seal it. Is that how you do it?
Yeah, there's no real hurry. But yeah, so here's what I should get a bag. Let me go grab a bag. I will be right back.
Am I still having feedback, Skipper?
Yeah, sometimes
I'm trying to stay muted. So
yeah.
Okay, here's a bag, right? Let's say I'm putting there's water and a fish in this bag, let's say. The first seal I do, is going to be like this. There's the camera. I don't know if you can see it, but there's not a seal on the very edge on this side. There's a little opening right here. Let's see. There you go. See that? That side, it's sealed all the way across except for right there's a little opening. And that's so I can then take my little oxygen gun, stick the nozzle in that little slot, squeeze it, and then fill the bag up with oxygen. Once that's done, I just pinch that spot, pull out the, pinch that opening, pull out the little oxygen gun nozzle, and then I seal it a second time. And this time, hang on, it's arts and crafts over here.
Yeah, you're fine.
Here, to make it a little easier to read, that this time I seal all the way across. So if you look at the bags we ship, you'll probably see two different seals. One that's not quite done all the way on the bottom, and then one above it that's done all the way across.
Okay.
That's just so we can get the oxygen in and then close it up completely after that.
And then when you do your corners, after you seal the corners, do you fold them up in? Like, you turn the bag inside out to do that?
So what we do for the corners is, let's see, can I find... Okay, give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
How about now, Skipper? Am I better?
Do you have your earbuds in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does it sound like it's raining though?
A little bit, but what was happening was there was some time whenever Dan would talk, it would come back over. You know what I mean?
Weird. Okay.
Are we having audio issues?
No,
No.
I'm on this.
Poor Bob was.
Yeah.
Okay, let me open this bag of bags. Just a second here, just trying to open this. Okay. So that's a good point. I didn't talk about the corners. So this is how the bag arrives, right? The problem is, and we've all seen it, where you get a bag, a fish is in the corner, and it's been kind of pinched in the corner.
Yeah.
During the shipping process, and that's not good for the fish. Sometimes it kills them, sometimes it just stresses them out. This is one of my biggest pet peeves with the exporters I buy from, is when they use bags that have these long corners, and then in transit the bag gets a little bit flaccid. That's a fun word. But that flaccid bag, then that just, squishes the fish if it's in the corner. So to prevent that, there's two ways to prevent that. One is to take your heat sealer and just seal off the corners. So you're basically making a rounded bottom, more or less, right? So that there's not a corner for the fish to go into, basically. The other thing you can do is make a flat bottomed bag without corners. So you squish the bag down like this. Well, hang on. I can usually do it real quick, but I screwed that one up because I was thinking something else. So you do the bag like this, the bottom, and then you seal across here and across here. So you're cutting those corners off right there, or sealing across there. And that's how you end up with this, a nice flat bottom bag. If you've got a pleco or a quarry or something, it's got a flat bottom to rest on because those guys are going to want to sit on the bottom. You've crimped the corners off, and that's a great way to do it as well. So there's a couple ways to do it to prevent the fish from getting in a corner and getting squished, basically.
Yeah, I think that was Alishan's question on if you use flat bottom bags for certain fish, especially with bills and things.
And I've looked to find pre-manufactured flat bottom bags. The problem is the way the industry does it, if you're buying it from Uline or one of those suppliers, is they do this weird gusset thing where this isn't sealed. It's like folded in and pulled, but the fish can still swim in there and down across the bottom. They kind of fold it over and seal it down on the bottom. So I haven't found a way to do that without doing it myself, unfortunately. I wish I could, because one of my least favorite time sucks in the world is sitting down, and doing this for hours on a Friday. but hey, at least it's an excuse to watch some YouTube. So
Exactly.
Monica Lynn says, which sealer do you like?
I can probably show you, but if you go to uline.com, that's where I generally buy my sealers. I've done Amazon and stuff, but they just seem to be kind of cheaper. The uline.com has some more burly sealers. And I personally use the 8-inch one. That's usually plenty. If you're going to do larger fish, you can get them in 10 inches or whatever. That's the one I go with. Now, that being said, my brother bought like a $20 one off Amazon, and it's fine for small volumes. But I've got sealers that have been going for 10 years and still don't have a problem from Uline. So I'm doing high volume. I want sturdy ones. The ones on Uline are going to be around $100. But if you just do one here or there, a cheap one's probably fine. The seal itself is usually 2 millimeters, I guess, thick. And that seems to be sufficient. That's pretty standard. If you could find one that's 4 millimeters thick, that's probably, better. It's a little thicker seal, but the ones we use are 2 because that's how they come, and they've done fine for us.
And you double bag everything, not just the spiny fish, right?
Oh yeah,
everything.
I double bag
Okay.
everything. I can, in the last 3 years-ish, since I've been kind of really doing this as a business, I think maybe there's been one time that there was any dampness in the box whatsoever. Yeah, it works really well. Now, rubber bands are fine too. If you use rubber bands, you actually might not want to use the 4 mil bags. They're so thick that they are hard to twist up and get a tight seal. So in that case, it might be better, oddly enough, to go ahead and stick with the 2 mil bag just so you can get the right seal. But then I would double or maybe even triple that, just for redundancy.
A couple people asked what thickness you use while you were explaining that, so thank you. All right.
4 mil, but with a heat sealer, that's awesome. With rubber bands, that can be a little difficult.
Right. Let's see. I have rubber bands. Maria Z did a $9.99 super sticker, but I can't see what it is.
It says,
On
thank
StreamYard.
you.
Happy birthday, Maria.
Yeah. Bob, it says, thank you with a pair bowing.
Oh, back at you. I got to be careful. If I bow, there's going to be so much shine that I might blind people.
Listen, man, I feel your pain.
Danik Aquatics, as everybody knows, comes on after us, and we have links for that and reminders, and Maria will definitely pitch us out of here before then. But Stephanie is his special guest, Aquaria Life, so she's heading on over there. So Stephanie, thank you so much, and we'll see you over there in just a little bit.
Cool.
Dan, I have a question. I don't ship fish, and I don't ship them often because I'm so afraid that they're all going to die. How do you get over that? Like, I did fish axolotl eggs. I set up a store on Get Gills, but I'm too afraid to ship.
That's what friends are for, Susie. So, seriously, one of the best things, and something I'm happy to do and do a lot for people actually, is, or if someone else wants, someone else can do it for you too. But I'm happy to receive test shipments. They don't even have to have any fish in them. If you box up as if you were shipping fish, put the bags in with the water and the oxygen and the insulation and the heat pack or whatever, everything, just sans fish, and send those out to a few people, then you can test and you don't have to worry about actually hurting a fish in the process. And you can get feedback on things like, did they leak? What was the temperature of the water in the bags when they first opened the bag? All that stuff that is important. And you can do that for a few times until you feel like, okay, I've got that right. I don't have any leaks. The temperature's being good and all that. Once you feel like you have that dialed in, send them the same thing, but maybe with a few test fish in there. And that's something I think that can help because, yeah, I understand. I'm a pretty happy guy but I do live with anxiety because as long as the fish are in transit, I've got that in the back of my mind, right? And it's important enough to me, and I know to Mandy and everyone on the team that it's something we're always thinking about. It's like, did they get there? Are they okay? So I feel the pain. I understand it. I guess I was a little lucky because when I started at like 13 years old, it's just
Didn't care.
no. I think I cared, but it's been so long that it kind of just naturally happened.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was never a guy to swallow a goldfish live or light ants on fire, but
No
yeah.
way.
Thank you, Freaky Fish Lady. She said the axolotl eggs arrived perfect. The axolotls are a little bit easier because it's cold water.
Right.
And they're eggs and they're pretty sturdy. Like as opposed to baby axolotls, I don't think I would ever ship.
Oh yeah, those furry gills and stuff. Like, I don't know anything about axolotls, but it seems like a lot could happen wrong. They're very soft.
Okay. Any other questions? We got a little less than 10 minutes, Maria's telling us. So,
Well, Dan, how's it looking on the build? What are we looking at now for a
Yeah,
date?
let's talk about the build.
We turn water on tomorrow, which is exciting. Actually, that's the reason I was able to do this is we're only shipping about half the fish we normally would because we put a cap on it. Because tomorrow we're turning on the water, and so we all need to be available to go, for that event. And then we're also receiving an import. So I only had to catch half the fish today that I normally would on a Sunday, which freed up my afternoon to be here. But it's pretty exciting. So when I say turn on the water, I don't mean like we turn it on and the system's all going. What I mean is we have the bypass on, so water's not going to the tanks yet. And we're testing each component of the system. We're making sure the controls and sensors and brains of each piece talk to each other. So we've done all the dry testing we can. Tomorrow we'll start the wet testing, as we're calling it. There'll probably be about a week of that or so before we've tested all the scenarios we need to test and then can open it up and actually get water to the tanks. But it's pretty exciting. The water draw site's done. I need to go out there and I'll confirm that next week. It looks done to me, but I want to make sure it's done. And if it is, we're going to get a bunch of like native grass seeds and stuff and go plant out there and kind of return it from a dirt construction site back to kind of nature. But it's done enough that we can draw the water without any issue. So I'm super excited. This has been a long time coming, and I'm like a kid on his last week as a senior in high school. Just get me in there,
Well, we're all excited for you.
Thank
really.
you.
Now, will you be doing any of your own breeding there since you have more room, or is that something you won't be doing?
Well, the fish nerd in me can't really help the need to breed because, as we know.
No.
But it's not going to be something we rely on at all. What I think is probably likely to happen is for the first while, every now and then something will breed and it'll be like, oh, they bred. Oh, okay, good. Let's save the babies and raise them and, have some fun. But I think for the first few years, it's probably going to take just about all I have just to keep this thing running and scale it. Scaling a business is an all-consuming feat, I would say. But once that's done and the people are in place, that things are running okay, then my dream is to set up a breeding rack and just make detailed YouTube videos on breeding lots of different species. To me, that's my favorite part of the hobby. Yeah. So I'll get back there. It's going to just depend on the demands of scaling and the timeline that ends up being.
Amber's in the house saying, "Hey, Dan."
So there was another question that Alishon asked was, do you use pure oxygen for everything, right? Because he was asking for corridors and anabantoids.
Good question. Yes, I do. Okay, let me dispel a couple myths. Let's talk about salt first. So the shipping water we talked about is tap water that's been dechlorinated, stabilized, and gassed off, and has 5 grams of salt per liter. So 5 parts per thousand per liter added to it. And that's for everything. That's for cories, that's for plecos, that's for loaches, that's for gobies. All the fish that you've heard over and over are super sensitive to salt. No, that is not true. So every fish we ship is shipped in that salty concoction. The only thing that isn't is shrimp. I don't ship cherry shrimp or blue dream shrimp or that kind of stuff with the salt. And it's just because I have no idea how they'll react. I need to do some tests and things. But every fish, that's the concentration. As long as the salt is fully dissolved in the water, then they're fine. You run into the issue where the salt isn't dissolved. You got a pile of salt on the bottom of the container or the bag or the aquarium or whatever, and then the fish goes down and comes in contact with that, and now you've got a hypersaline zone. That will kill a fish. But if it's all dissolved in the water, then it's perfectly fine. Now, a couple things. I'm confident about that because literally every fish that we ship is in that solution. And at the aquarium, the Aquatic Veterinary Conference, I asked that question: are there any freshwater fish that I should not put salt with? And the answer was none of those veterinarians, and there were 6 on the panel, knew of any freshwater fish that could not take salt in a concentration of 5 to 8 parts per thousand. So that's what I do. So what? Hang on, there was something else I was going with that. And that's the oxygen question. The other thing we find is a lot of people say that anabantoids and cories and hoplocats, anything that breathes atmospheric air, bikers, can't take pure oxygen, that somehow that will damage them. Nope. I've never seen that hurt a fish. Now, could there be one out there I just have not encountered yet? Yes, but we shipped many, many thousands and thousands of fish and several hundred species, and I've yet to find it. So I'm calling BS on that myth.
Cool.
Peplin Creek says Dan needs to come back soon. I agree.
You don't know it, but I'm often lurking or listening to replays as I'm working. But I love hanging out with fish nerds. It's one of my favorite things. It's just time right now is hard to come by. So
you were listening to the replay, I think, last week, and you commented on it. And I'm like, oops, he heard me say, well, maybe I'll ask Dan to come over. So there you go.
I was waiting for the text. I knew it was coming.
Yep, there you go. Well, we sure appreciate you, Dan. Lots of great information. Is there any other last question? Maria's going to literally start the 59, 58, 57 second countdown. She does her job well.
Joseph Stanley did ask, Dan, with doing such big water changes daily, do you need to cycle your tank?
No, there'll be no filters in the tanks in the fish warehouse. So let's think about this. Let's say you're using a sump to filter your aquarium. What happens? The water flows out of your aquarium, goes down into the sump, gets exposed to nitrifying bacteria, maybe a filter sock or something like that, right? And then comes back up into your tank. We're doing the same thing. It's just we're never returning water to the tank. So old water's leaving the tank and old water's never coming back. It's only fresh water. So just think of like a sump, how you have to put a certain volume through to stabilize the tank. Now remove the sump. Instead of the water going in the sump, it's just leaving the tank and fresh water is coming in. That's how we're controlling nitrogenous waste.
And where's that water going?
You got to watch a video.
Yeah, but that's a big explanation.
Yeah. So the short version of it is it's filtered, sterilized, cooled down, and then we built an artificial creek that runs into the natural creek. And so it flows over, like, we built artificial rapids going back to the creek. Okay. It's called a rip rap. And so once it's been cooled, sterilized, gone through a 1/2 to 5 micron filter. So we've caught any fry or eggs or any baby shrimp or anything like that. Then it is returned to the creek through an artificial creek.
Way cool.
Yeah, David asked if you, so Dan, so 5 mils of it to 1,000 mils, talking about the salt, is useful for what purpose? And that'll be our last question, guys.
Let's see here. One more time, Bob. Something about 2,000 mil?
He said, Dan, so 5 ml per 1,000 ml is useful for what purpose?
Is he talking salt?
Salt.
Yeah, the salt.
Oh, we're talking 5 grams per liter. So, okay, it relieves osmotic stress on fish, and it does other things too. It can basically neutralize. If you take a fish and it has velvet on it, for example, or some other external parasite that is not embedded already inside the fish, it's just on the fish, hasn't dug down through the epidermis, more or less, of the fish, and you put that in the salty solution, you can actually see those things jumping off the fish. In fact, my veterinarian had trouble because I was using the salty water when I was sending the fish to the veterinarian to have workups done. And he's like, I don't see anything on the fish. And I'm like, dude, that fish has velvet. I could see it like coating the fish when it was here. And he's like, I don't see any velvet on the fish. And then he took some water from the bottom of the bag. It's like, oh, okay, they jumped off the fish. So I'm not saying that that's a cure-all, but it does help relieve some parasite infestations if there's a parasite on the fish during transit. But the main reason, and there's lots of benefits, but the main reason is it reduces osmotic stress. So fish expend an enormous amount of energy just keeping the water that's surrounding them out of their cell tissue, out of their bodies, out of their body cavity. Because osmotic pressure is trying to force that water into the fish. If you make that water surrounding the fish salty, then there's a lot less pressure forcing itself into the fish, and the fish can use that energy that it saves needing to fight that pressure and put it into things like having an immune system. So it just lowers the workload that the fish needs to do in the bag to survive the journey.
Mickey, I recommended a fish for you to get if you could, but I'm not even going to try to pronounce that.
Paraguayan catfish. Yep.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. All right. I hate to stop. We have 55 people. That's the most we've had here the whole stream, but I don't want to go over Kenny. So you'll have to do a part 2, Dan, when you get opened up and all that. How's that?
I'm happy to be here at your service.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. You heard it here, guys. Thank you, everybody.
I like my kneecaps, Bob. What can I say?
All right. You heard that, Skipper.
Yeah, you don't want to send a hitman to Wyoming.
That's right. Thanks, everybody. And I'll see y'all over at Daniken's in a minute.
Night,
Awesome
folks.
stream. Thank you.
Night, guys.